is a Winchester resident who believes that from scratch cooking is better, healthier, and usually easier than prepared meals. She teaches cooking classes in which her goal is to demonstrate shortcuts and tips to make cooking more user-friendly to those who are hesitant in the kitchen. She is a recipe developer and worked with Waltham resident Laura Brody on Laura's latest two books, Chocolate American Style and The New England Fable. Susan is also a real estate lawyer, Commodore of the Winchester Boat Club, and a community volunteer. And with her husband, Patrick Donato, she's raising 4 teenage children. Wow. I had 5 kids.
You don't look it.
This program is presented by the Education Committee of the Winchester Seniors Association and is supported by a grant from the John and Mary Murphy Educational Foundation. Everyone's hungry. Susan Schwartz.
I have the microphone on. If you cannot hear me, I'll try to speak more loudly, or I'll try to adjust. I want to introduce you to Catherine McNaughton, who is, until very recently, a Winchester resident and my surrogate daughter. So she's been here helping me in classes that I teach quite a bit. So she's an old pro at this. And she is going to pass out these trays of chocolate for you. Now we set them aside and left them here because I didn't want you nibbling out of order. And I want you to taste the chocolate. This is a blind chocolate tasting. And so I want you to really think about the way you're tasting the chocolate. And I want you to taste it in a specific order. And you have notes on your tables so that you can keep track of what you've tasted and rate it, and maybe decide what it is that you like best. The point of a blind tasting is not to be distracted by brand or by packaging, but to think very carefully about what you like. And the best chocolate is the one that you like. So that's the key here, to figure out what it is sort of in an environment where you're just thinking about your own taste. It doesn't matter what your neighbor likes, it doesn't matter what the packaging is, it doesn't matter what the advertising is, or what's on the shelves most prominently. What matters is what you like, and what you like best is what you should buy to cook with, to eat, whatever. So this gives you an opportunity to do that. So Catherine is going to hand out all the chocolates. I can help her. She's going to hand out all the trays. And on these trays are plates numbered from 1 to 13. It's a lot of chocolate. So there's only a little bit of, and I'll let you organize these the way you want to on your tables. You only want to taste a little bit. I promise you, when you get to number 13, you will be so sick of chocolate that you might not want to taste the extra 2 chocolates, numbers 14 and 15, that are up here. And at the end of the tasting, I will tell you what you tasted, and you can figure out what it is that you like. But right now, I'm not going to give you that hint. I think there are 7 tables and 7 trays, so you should be all set. So if I may, oh, I'm sorry, are there not enough? You know, there might not be enough, and if there aren't, then Judy said that she would make more.
Okay, or you know what, we can put you on the table. Okay. What table is still missing? Right here?
I have 2 efforts and you can go to
1, 2, yeah. Okay, Mary. Right over there.
So once you've organized your plates, once you've organized your plates, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the way to start a tasting. So what you want to do is make sure that you've got a clean palate. So the way you do that, since you may have brushed your teeth, you may have had some coffee or tea or something, that might affect the taste of your way you're supposed to brush your teeth. So the way you do that is you take a piece of chocolate, any chocolate that you like, and just taste it. Just eat it. Don't worry about how it tastes. Just take a piece. Doesn't matter which one it is. Doesn't matter. Just take a piece and get it in your mouth so that your palate is set for the chocolate tasting. And then once you've done that, give it a good chew. Maybe take a sip of water. Maybe take a cracker. There's crackers on the table. So once you're all set and your palate is set, you can taste the first chocolate.
This is one. Can you do it in order?
So if you're ready to taste the first chocolate, go ahead and do that. Now the first chocolate is the most bitter chocolate you will taste. And I'll explain what that means in terms of what makes a chocolate bitter and what makes a chocolate sweeter or milky. The first thing I want to do is talk to you a little bit, as you're tasting that first chocolate, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you might be tasting. You might let it melt in your mouth a little bit. Chocolate is made partially with cocoa butter, which is this magic fat that melts at body temperature. So when you put a piece of chocolate in your hand, you know, there's that chocolate coating on an M&M that sort of prevents the chocolate that's inside from melting when it hits your hand. But if you were to hold a piece of one of these chocolates in your hand, it would start melting pretty quickly. And when you put it in your mouth, if you take a couple of chews and then let it melt sort of slowly on your tongue, you can begin to taste some of the flavors that the chocolate maker put into the chocolate. So chocolate is made from a bean, grows on a tree, comes in a big fat pod about this big. And when the pod is picked, the grower, the farmer, on usually some cooperative and some equatorial zone, because cocoa trees only grow in equatorial zones. So the farmer would take the pod, cut it in half, scoop out the beans that are inside, and there's a white gooey pulp. And that white pulp with the beans sits and ferments for a few days in the sun. And all the bacteria, for want of a better word, that are naturally in the pulp and the bean start to work together, and that's the first process in developing flavor. After that, the beans are dried, and then they're generally packaged and shipped out to a factory where they're, it's a long process, but they're roasted. Then the hulls are taken away from the beans, and then they are mixed. They're pressed first so that the cocoa butter and the cocoa solids are separated from each other. So the cocoa solids are, it's like a chocolate cake almost. It's a hard, dry chocolate cake, and that can be ground to make cocoa, regular, plain, natural cocoa. The cocoa butter itself is separated out, and that's used for other things. It can be used for makeup, it can be used for hand creams, or it could go back into the cocoa solids in various proportions depending on the manufacturer to make the chocolate that you're eating. So once the cocoa solids are mixed back with the cocoa butter, maybe they're mixed with some sugar, maybe it's mixed with some flavoring, maybe it's mixed with some lecithin or other products. And then it's churned and pressed and kneaded and put through machines called conching machines. And that process of conching the chocolate makes it smooth and not grainy and shiny, and it develops all of the flavors. So the manufacturers determine the flavor profile of the chocolate that they're making by looking at the beans that they use. And as I said, most of the beans are, all the beans are from equatorial areas. Most beans are from Africa. And those are sort of the workhorse beans. A chocolate maker may decide to add in some Central American or Caribbean or South American beans. And that changes the profile because those beans might be fruity, or they might be more acidic, or they might be floral tasting. And a chocolate manufacturer will taste the beans and understand what the profile is of the chocolate that they want to make. So a really great chocolate will have a manufacturer who is thinking a lot about flavor of the beans, and is also thinking about the process that they use in order to manufacture the chocolate. And they're very careful about monitoring the percentages of cocoa that go, or chocolate solids that go into their product. So now you're seeing, you can see sort of Hershey's chocolate on the supermarket shelves, and you won't know how much cocoa solid is in that chocolate. But you can go and see, say, Lindt or Taza chocolate, or sort of one of the more boutique manufacturers, and you'll always be able to see the percentage of cocoa or chocolate solids that's in that chocolate. And so what happens is you can have a 70% chocolate. 70% means that's the amount of cocoa or chocolate solids that's in there. The other 30% is for the most part sugar. So the 70% will be, say, less sweet than a 50% chocolate, because 50% chocolate would be 50-50 chocolate and sugar. So you are tasting here, the very first chocolate that you taste is a 90% chocolate. And you're going to work your way all the way down in terms, or all the way up in terms of the amount of sugar to milk chocolates. And there's some chocolate chips that are there too, just so that you can taste the difference between different kinds of chocolate chips. Everything that I've got here is pretty much widely available from the supermarket or from Whole Foods, or I have to thank Taza Chocolate, which is our local chocolate manufacturer. Taza Chocolate is right here in Somerville. They import their beans mostly from South America and the Caribbean, so very interesting flavor profiles on their beans. And then they mix them using stones. They actually manufacture the chocolate right in Somerville from the beans, and they use stones. So their chocolate is very identifiable. It tends to be a little bit grittier than maybe a Lindt chocolate. You know how you eat, probably all of you, a Lindt chocolate truffle. It's very unctuous and it really melts very easily. Taza chocolate is a little bit less so. But Taza has donated chocolate to this tasting, so the second chocolate that you're going to taste will be that one. You'll be able to identify it very, very easily by its texture. After this, I'm not giving you any more hints about what you're tasting. You're going to taste it all and have to decide for yourself. And Taza, if you make it to the end, Taza also donated some Chipotle chocolate, which is a very hot, spicy chocolate, and a vanilla chocolate, because they thought you might be interested in tasting some of their flavored chocolates. These are the only flavored chocolates that we're going to taste today. Yes?
You said Taza chocolate?
T-A-Z-A, Taza, right in Somerville. They do, sure. Catherine's going to hand out some brochures that they gave us, because they would love it if you would come and go to their factory tour. They've got a small factory right in Somerville, right on the Cambridge line, and they would love to give you a tour there. So while you taste, I'm going to let you all taste. Think about the aroma, the texture, the flavors on your tongue. Are you getting burnt caramel or espresso? Are you getting flowery tastes? Are you getting orangey tastes, fruit, apricot, cherries? Sometimes people say that they can taste dirt, tobacco, all kinds of flavors that you might be getting in the chocolate. And I'm going to let you all taste slowly and carefully, take notes, and meanwhile I'm going to show you some things that you can do with chocolate. Because I think it's nice to eat chocolate just plain, but I love to bake with chocolate. So I am going to start with a plain butter cookie, like a Milano cookie, that has a chocolate filling. It couldn't be easier. Remember, as Jack said, what I like to do is show people how easy it is to cook delicious things from scratch. You can go to the store and you can buy a Milano cookie, but it's so simple to make your own, and it will be much better, night and day. And you'll be able to taste that at the end if you still have the stamina to taste these things. I've got everything that I'm demonstrating today, you will be able to taste. So, I'm going to start with the chocolate filling for the cookies. Let's see, where am I here? So this chocolate filling is called a ganache. And a ganache is nothing more than melted chocolate and cream together in a specific ratio, which will give you either a thin texture or a thick texture, depending on what the ratio is. So I'm just using regular old heavy cream.
It's coming.
And you have this recipe. These are the slice and bake butter cookies if you wanted to follow along. And I'm making the ganache filling first. So I'm first going to measure the cream. Now, I like doing things in real time, but we don't have a lot of real time, so I've done some shortcuts. I'm just going to cook this cream until it's pretty much boiling in the microwave. You know how when you measure any liquid, I know that this is, like, I teach this when I teach little kids too, but you know how when you do this, you can see what the level is? You really can't. You really can't. You really need to get down and look at the meniscus. Remember that from science. You need to look at the meniscus. If you go to buy a new Pyrex measuring cup now, I just broke one, and I found that you cannot buy these straight-sided Pyrex measuring cups anymore. Pyrex is now making them in a sort of conical shape so that you can look down inside and see what the measurements are. And if you do this, all the measurements are backwards. But you'll understand when you go to the store if you look for a Pyrex measuring cup. I don't understand why they're doing it this way. I'll put it on for a minute and we'll see what happens. When I bake, I really like the convenience of using, these are not chocolate chips. These are, they're made by Calavo. And you have these in your tasting, maybe you'll be able to identify them, in which case you get your third clue. But these are Calavo chips that I buy in bulk. I'll show you if I can see the bag. You can buy a big 22-pound bag of them. It's heavy, but you don't run out of chocolate very often. I'm sorry? This is real chocolate. This is Belgian chocolate made by a company called Calavo. It's 60.3%. And that's all that's in here is chocolate and a little vanilla and sugar.
But it's different blends.
What number?
It's the Calavo blend. So Calavo, a company like Calavo or Lindt, it's 60%. And yeah, and a company like Calavo or Lindt always will make its chocolate taste the same. So from bag to bag, that chocolate will always taste the same this year or next year. They blend their chocolate specifically to get the flavor profile. Yes?
Where did you get that?
I got that at Marty's Liquors in Newham. That's the only place I know to get it. You can also buy big, huge blocks of chocolate. But what a pain in the neck that is to have to chop up the blocks of chocolate. This is broken up. It looks like chocolate chips. And to me, that's the easiest way for me to bake because this is warm. Because I weigh everything that I bake. I do not use measuring cups if I can help it. Why do I do that? Because it's so much easier to be able to cook. I don't have to worry about grabbing a measuring cup and having to clean a measuring cup. All I do is I measure my 6 ounces straight into the cream. And I'm done. And if I needed to add some sugar, I could add sugar. I know that a cup of sugar, most recipes actually these days, a lot of recipes I should say, tend to be written with weights and volume measurements. And to me, that's just much easier. The book that Laura and I worked on, that we wrote, Chocolate American Style, everything in here is by weight. And professional bakers will always use weights, always. They don't use measuring cups. How can you do that when you're making such big quantities? But they always will use weights. Another reason to use weights is that a recipe is a formula, right? It's just a formula. And if you want to recreate what the recipe developer intended, you need to recreate the formula exactly. And if you can use weight, then you can be much more precise about the measurements that you have. If you're measuring, I'll show you later, but if we get time, but if you're measuring a cup of flour, if you scoop it out of the container, you might have a 5-ounce cup of flour. If you sprinkle it into your measuring cup, the way you're taught in home ec class, we don't do home ec anymore, cooking, you might end up with a 4 1/4 ounce cup of flour. If you have 3 cups of flour in your recipe, you can tell that would be a very big difference. You might even scoop it tightly into your measuring cup and end up with a 5 1/2 ounce cup of flour. And that might be okay if that's what the recipe developer intended. But if it's not, then you'll end up with a much different product than what you think you're making. It doesn't, if that's what you like, that's fine. You know, you can change a recipe however you like, but it might, in the case of something like flour, it might throw off the proportion of how much baking soda or baking powder. It might change the way a product rises at the end. You want to do it as precisely as you can, as the recipe developer intended. So I've added my 6 ounces of chocolate, and I'm going to give it a stir. This is just chocolate and heavy cream. It looks like a mistake, right? But I do this in glass so that you can see that you should have faith. And ultimately, it will melt. And if you let it sit for a while, it'll ultimately turn out nice and thick, believe it or not, like this. And this is the same stuff. This is nothing different. It's the same exact stuff. It's just been allowed to sit on the counter until it was nice and cold and thick, and then I put it in the fridge overnight last night. So now it's spreadable, and we can use it for our cookies. So I'll make the cookies. Now if you, I guess we could use the mixer. Okay.
My grandson, his grandson, nice chocolate.
So I'd like to talk quite a bit about ingredients.
Yeah.
And I did say that I do like to do things sort of start to finish from scratch, where you would be in your kitchen. You wouldn't be having everything all measured out for you, but we just don't have the time for that today, so I'm not able to do that. But butter that I use, I almost always use Land O'Lakes unsalted butter. And the reason I use unsalted butter is that salt is a preservative, right? So salted butter might be sitting on the supermarket shelves for longer, and it just might not be as fresh. The other reason is that different manufacturers use different levels of salt. And if you want to control the amount of salt in your baking, you use unsalted butter and then add the salt back in according to the recipe. Having said that, Catherine can tell you, I don't always measure my salt. But you sort of get an eye. I'm sure a lot of you have an eye for how much salt, how much is a pinch, how much is a quarter of a teaspoon. You can measure it in the palm of your hand, kind of. Same with vanilla, dash of vanilla here and a dash of vanilla there. This is sugar. The sugar doesn't look exactly white because I had in my house last night. I was measuring this in organic sugar. So this is just Domino organic sugar. It's not, it doesn't have that white color, but I think it has, I'm sorry? It hasn't been bleached. It's maybe a little coarser texture. And I've added the salt to it already. So you've got the recipe there. You can keep me honest and follow along if you'd like, if I forget anything. And I have vanilla here. Now this vanilla, this is really wonderful vanilla. This is a vanilla extract. It's called Crush, and it's made by Sonoma Syrup Company. And since I found it, I've stopped using the regular bourbon vanilla that you can get. Even though that's really delicious, this has vanilla bean seeds in it, and it just, it's so good.
What's the name again?
It's called Sonoma Syrup Company, Vanilla Bean Extract Crush.
Did you buy that at Williams-Sonoma?
You can buy it at Williams-Sonoma, you can buy it at
Because I figured maybe the name has something to do with it.
King Arthur Flour. But you can also buy it at Marshall's, and anytime I see it at Marshall's, I buy it there because it's much cheaper. It's kind of,
What's the name of it again?
I'll leave it here too. It's Sonoma Syrup Company, Vanilla Bean Extract Crush. So Vanilla Crush.
Not to be mistaken.
All right, and I've very carefully measured that vanilla. Okay. So we'll beat this up. Hopefully not make a mess. You can do this with a wooden spoon. And if your butter is nice and soft, this butter is a little cool because it was sitting out in my cold kitchen last night. But if you have nice soft butter in the summertime or in the springtime, or if your kitchen is nice and warm, you can do this with a wooden spoon. This is kind of a no-brainer recipe. I just really want to show you how easy it is to make this, so that you'll do this at home. So far, nothing really too exciting going on here. We're just mixing the the butter and the sugar and the vanilla and the salt. And once that's mixed, I'm going to add the flour. Now, as I said, this is 2 cups of flour. Okay, I measured it on the scale. I used 4.5 ounces of flour for each cup. I use, the differences in the flour. I always use King Arthur flour. King Arthur flour is unbleached. Pillsbury flour is bleached, usually. You can get an unbleached version also. All the brands of flour are manufactured to have a certain protein level. So all-purpose flour has one protein level. I should know, but I don't remember what it is. It's on the bag of flour. You look like you might know. Do you know what it is? No? Okay. I don't know either. But bread flour has a higher protein level. It makes a stronger product. You wouldn't use a bread flour to make a cake because it would be
Right, there's
dense
different-
and leaden.
That's right, there's different flour.
Right. And you would use cake flour when you want the lowest amount of protein. But you have to use the kind of flour that the recipe asks for, otherwise your recipe won't work. So this is all-purpose flour, and it's King Arthur, so it's not that bright white because King Arthur flour is not bleached. And I'll add this in, and hopefully we won't get it splattering all over.
Your assistant was a good.
My assistant, she has not had her moment to shine yet, but she is a star.
Chocolate, yes.
All right, so I'm mixing this in. And again, if I was doing this with a wooden spoon, I might be able to do this, or I might end up just saying, oh, the heck with it, and using my hands. There's nothing wrong with using your hands. Your hands are great tools as long as they're clean, which is what I tell my children. And the children who I teach. I'm going to just turn this up and hope that it doesn't splatter. I'm sorry? All right, and this is going to start to come together and make a dough. A little faster. So if you have a stand mixer, this would take no time at all. But I didn't bring my stand mixer here today. Okay. How's the chocolate going? Are you liking some things? Are you finding some things? Are you tasting differences? Finding some things that are really delicious? Okay. My hands aren't entirely clean, so I'm going to put on some gloves.
I like that. That's why I'm saying.
They are.
And this
Got more flavor.
Okay, so I have this beautiful dough. It really is a dough now. You see? And I'm putting it on a piece of parchment paper.
Caramel is.
You can put it in plastic. Thank you, Kevin. You can put it in plastic. I just don't have my roll of plastic wrap here. And I'm going to shape it into a log. And depending on what you want to use these cookies for, you might shape it into two logs, two long, skinny logs. So you might make one big fat log. You can, this is your product. You can do what you want with it. The cooking police are not there for you. So I'm just shaping this roughly into a log, and I'm going to roll it and really push against it to try to make it round. Sometimes what I like to do, because now I'm going to take this log of dough and put it in the fridge and let it sit in the fridge until it gets hard for about 2 hours, at least 2 hours. The bad news about this recipe is if you want these cookies right now, you can't have them because you have to wait 2 hours. The good news about this recipe is that if you want them 3 days from now, you make them today and you're golden. You've got this really gold sitting in your fridge or in your freezer until you're ready to bake them. And once you decide that you want to make these cookies, it will take you the time it takes to preheat your oven to make the cookies. Yes?
How long can you keep it in the fridge?
I wouldn't keep it in the refrigerator for more than about 3 or 4 days.
So then it should go in the freezer.
But then it should go in the freezer, really well wrapped. And the secret about most baked goods can go in the freezer, and as long as they're really well wrapped, they won't degrade in quality. A great chocolate chip cookie will be delicious a week from now after it's been in the freezer, or even maybe a month from now if it's been well wrapped. So you can freeze most baked goods. You're going to want to let it thaw before you cut these, because otherwise, once you slice this log of dough, it's going to start to crack if it's cold from the freezer. You don't want it to crack. And then when you take it out of your fridge or freezer after it's been sitting for a while, all you do is slice these, lay them out on a baking sheet, and let them bake. Your baking sheet has to be covered with parchment, or do you know about silpat mats? There's silicone reusable mats that you can use. Silpat mats are wonderful, and if you have them, you never have to think about parchment, buying parchment over and over again. You can just use the Silpats. But the thing about a Silpat is if you want to buy a Silpat, you probably should take your baking sheet with you to the store and make sure that the Silpat that you buy fits your baking sheet. Because there's all different sizes of Silpats and all different sizes of baking sheets. And
Where do you get those?
any place. You can get those at Bed Bath & Beyond. You can get them at Williams-Sonoma. You can mail order them through probably Amazon. There's different brands of them. They're just reusable silicone baking sheets. And I think what they have is they're embedded with a bit of fiberglass, I think, to give them some substance. So it's not just those really thin silicone baking mats that they used to carry. Yes? What a good question. You can do either. You can do either. So if you have the chocolate that's sort of this texture, and my cream is cool in here, my cream has cooled down, so this isn't going to melt. But if you have the chocolate that's sort of a more liquidy texture, then you could just dip the cookies right in, and that's very good because these cookies are very rich. 2 sticks of butter. That's a very rich shortbread-like cookie. Or you can make sandwich cookies, which is what I've done here.
No, that's Kendall Found.
With these. So these are all sandwich cookies. They kind of look like Milanos, but they don't taste like Milanos. You know, Milanos were baked a couple of months ago. You do, but I want you to taste your chocolates, and then I will give you samples of everything that I make. The next thing that I'm going to make, are there any questions about the shortbread cookies? No? Okay. And the next thing I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to make chocolate bark. At Christmas time, I was doing tons of chocolate. Here. At Christmas time, I was doing a ton of chocolate bark. The cool thing about chocolate bark is that you can see from your recipes, I've given you 4 different options for how to make the chocolate bark. But you can add anything you want to. Lately, I've been loving a little bit of sea salt sprinkled on the top and do that salty sweet thing that's so popular now. The chocolate bark that you're going to taste and that I'm going to make is made with ginger, crystallized candied ginger, that you used to be able to get at Trader Joe's. I think I might have gotten the last bit of it. When I was there yesterday, they did not have crystallized. They only had uncrystallized ginger and big chunks. So you would have to take some scissors, maybe dipped in some cornstarch, in order to be able to cut those chunks. Or maybe sprayed with cooking spray. Just took your scissors and sprayed it with cooking spray. You can cut the uncrystallized ginger into chunks. So all I'm doing now is I'm taking, and I'm using a measuring cup because I'm going to do sort of a third, a third, a third. And I'm going to do, let's see, we'll do ginger and craisins. And this big bag of craisins just comes from BJ's. Catherine's breaking up the chocolate there. So because when chocolate is broken, it'll melt more smoothly. And I'm going to talk to you while she does this and while I'm measuring about how to melt chocolate. Chocolate is a very finicky substance. Remember, cocoa butter that's in all chocolate, cocoa butter burns very easily because it melts very well at body temperature. So you can imagine that it would burn at a low temperature also. Once you have burnt chocolate, it's not going to taste very good. It might seize. You know, you've all probably had this happen where chocolate just turns into a big hard mass and there's nothing you can do about it. So the chocolate might seize if it's cooked too long. It's just not going to be a pleasant thing. So you want to treat chocolate very delicately. And if you want to melt it in the microwave, you can do that. you're theoretically supposed to melt chocolate in the microwave at 50% power. I couldn't figure out how to get this to go to 50% power. So we're going to do it at 100% power. We're just going to keep checking it and stirring it and checking it and stirring it. And you can do that too if it's a pain in the neck to get your microwave to that 50% or if it doesn't do that. Another way that you can melt chocolate is on the stovetop in a double boiler. You can take a skillet and fill it with water and take a bowl that's a heat-proof bowl like this or a metal bowl and put it right in the water. But you want the water to be simmering and then turn it off before you put your chocolate in. And just let that bowl of chocolate sit there while the chocolate slowly melts. And that way the chocolate won't get to be too cold, too hot, too fast. If you have a double boiler, the idea is not to have the top of the double boiler sitting right in the water, because you don't want to create steam that comes up and then drips down onto the chocolate. If you get any liquid in your chocolate before it's melted, it might also seize. So chocolate's very delicate. I like doing it in the microwave because, first of all, I've told you before, I like to do everything as quickly as I can, and the microwave is right there for me, and I don't have to clean another pan, and I don't have to take a pan out, and I don't have to take up a burner on my stovetop, and it's just easy to do. And I know how my microwave works, so I like to melt chocolate in the microwave. For me, that's easier. You can do it however it works for you. One thing that people do, and you can do it in the microwave or you can do it on the stovetop, is tempering chocolate. What is tempering chocolate? Is that me? Oh, I'm sorry. Chocolate, when you get it in a bar like this, is what's called in temper. It snaps easily, it's shiny, it melts easily in your mouth, it's nice and smooth. And so this is in temper. When you melt it, it goes out of temper. And that's why sometimes you might see chocolate that's got that white bloom on it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that the cocoa butter, which is a finicky ingredient, isn't evenly mixed in anymore. Maybe the chocolate has melted unevenly, maybe it's been stored in the refrigerator, which you should not do, and so maybe it's been subject to temperature fluctuations. Whatever it is, that chocolate, that white bloom, doesn't mean that the chocolate's bad, it just means that the cocoa butter has risen to the surface. And so you might have that problem if your chocolate goes out of temper when you're melting it. Thank you. Just put this in for a minute. So you might have that problem where the chocolate goes out of temper. You can try to temper it. It's very difficult to temper chocolate. Chocolate manufacturers have chocolate tempering machines that hold the chocolate at specific temperatures. But when you temper chocolate, you want to bring it, say, to, I would have to look it up, but you bring it to, say, 109 degrees, not 107, not 111. You want to bring it to 109 degrees. And then you add in some unmelted, already tempered chocolate, so maybe chocolate that you've held back, and you stir it in slowly until the chocolate gets to be 90 degrees, which is about where it would feel warm, they say, above your lip. So you would take a little bit of the chocolate, you put it above your lip. If it's right, then that's good and you're done. If it's not right, you might want to add some more chocolate or some more untempered chocolate, or you might want to heat it up a little bit more. It's very finicky. And at the end of that, you get chocolate that's beautiful, that looks kind of like the chocolate that you just broke up. But another way to do that cheating, and this is what we're going to do today, because most people don't have the expertise or the time or the patience or the equipment to be able to temper chocolate. If you make something like this chocolate bar and you store it in the fridge, it'll stay, it's not in temper, but at least the cocoa butter won't come up and you won't get that white bloom, and it'll still be a beautiful looking product. So, sorry, I'm chatting here and forgetting to measure my nuts. Okay. So that's what I've done. And the truffles that I'm going to make for you also will live in the refrigerator, and they're coated with cocoa powder so that they'll stay beautiful, even though they're not sitting on the counter in a display case like all the gorgeous chocolates in the stores. Your homemade chocolates are so much fresher and so much better. So it's okay to store them in the fridge. Take them out maybe for 10 minutes before you want to serve them. Okay, so we have this lovely mixture of salted pistachios and the craisins and the ginger. I'm going to take out half a cup of that and put it aside. Is that ready? Oh, look at this. This looks beautiful. Okay, so you can see that there's still quite a few chunks of chocolate in there, but there's some melted chocolate. And that's good, because the unmelted chocolate means that I'm not burning anything. So we're melting it slowly enough. And I might just let that sit for a few minutes. If I was in my kitchen, I might just let that sit for a few minutes and just let it rest while the rest of the chocolate melts.
What is your chocolate of choice for the bar that you're using?
This is Lindt. This is the Lindt at 70%. I might also use the Calabo. I love the Calabo. I think that the Calabo, that 60% Calabo that I showed you in that big enormous bag, you can get that in 70% too, but I just find it too bitter for sort of everyday making a chocolate cake kind of thing. When you're baking, you can choose to use whatever chocolate you want. If a recipe says use semi-sweet or bittersweet, you can choose anything in that sort of semi-sweet to bittersweet to, well, semi-sweet to bittersweet range that you want. If you use a sweet chocolate, like Hershey's tends to be a sweet chocolate, they have one that's designated as sweet chocolate, you're going to have a lot more sugar in your recipe than what the recipe developer intended, and your recipe might not come out the same as what you expect. But if you use, say, a 60% chocolate, and the recipe wants a bittersweet, which might be, say, a 70 or 75%, it's not going to matter. That won't matter. You would not substitute a milk chocolate for a bittersweet chocolate. The milk chocolate has milk solids in it, and so it reacts very, very differently in baking. You could use a milk chocolate if it's chips, if you're making a chocolate chip cookie, because the cookie won't really, obviously the taste of the cookie will be affected, but the texture of the cookie won't be affected depending on the kind of chips you use when you're making, say, a chocolate chip cookie. And what makes a chocolate chip? A chocolate chip, obviously when you use it in a cookie, it won't melt. It doesn't melt. It gets nice and soft and gooey, but it won't melt in the way this chocolate has melted. And that's because the manufacturer makes the chocolate in such a way that it has less cocoa butter. Remember, the cocoa butter melts very easily. So it has less cocoa butter, and it has usually an ingredient like lecithin that also helps it hold its shape. So if you're melting chocolate chips in the microwave oven, you're going to want to check it frequently to make sure that you haven't burned your chocolate, because you won't be able to tell that the chocolate is melted. It's designed not to look melted when it's all soft and gooey.
Susan, do they put wax? Do they put wax in chocolate to keep it from melting?
What a good question. So there's a kind of chocolate called compound chocolate. That's the stuff that you get in those discs in the plastic bags at Michael's. That's not chocolate. That tends to be some sort of edible wax and other products with flavorings added in. And it melts very predictably and very smoothly. It won't burn. It doesn't need to be tempered, but it's not chocolate. If that's what you want to use, I know a lot of people use it. They might color it, or they might make lollipops using the molds that you can buy, the sticks that you can buy at Michael's. That's great, and obviously there's a place for that, but that's not what this is about. This is about the real chocolate.
If you were to get your chocolate at the Stop and Shop, what kind of chocolate would you get?
You can get Lindt at Stop and Shop. You can get Ghirardelli at Stop and Shop. The Ghirardelli chocolate is right there on the shelf with the baking chocolate. It says, the Ghirardelli, I think, says 65%. Same thing. It's interesting. You can obviously buy Baker's chocolate. It's what I grew up using and eating all the time. Baker's chocolate. I once did a blind taste test for people. I love these blind taste tests. I once did a blind taste test that was Baker's chocolate brownies using unsweetened chocolate versus, I don't remember what it was some high-end fancy, like Valrhona, which is really high-end French, I think, chocolate that was also unsweetened. And do you know that everybody in that room preferred the Baker's chocolate brownies? Everybody. So it doesn't matter what it costs. It doesn't matter what the brand name is. Everybody liked those Baker's chocolate brownies, and it must have been, I was thinking, because people are very used to that flavor. That's what people consider to be a delicious brownie. That's sort of people's quintessential idea of what a brownie is. So there's nothing wrong with using that, and anyone that tells you that there is something wrong with it maybe hasn't been inside your taste buds. So I'm just adding a cup. So I measured half a cup, half a cup, half a cup of those ingredients. I am just mixing them in. I've set aside half a cup, and I'm just dumping it. I want to get as much of it out of there as I can because it's delicious, expensive chocolate. But I'm just dumping it. And my pan is lined with parchment. And again, I do like to use parchment. You can use wax paper. You could use, there's a really great product now out from Reynolds Wrap it's a baking pan liner. It's parchment on one side and foil on the other. Nothing sticks to it, so it's a little expensive, but it's a great product. So I have this, I don't know if you can see it, I don't want to tip it because it'll spill, but I'm going to add the ingredients that I held back just to the top so everybody knows what kind of chocolate this is, what kind of bark. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this lovely pink Trader Joe's Himalayan sea salt and grate it on top. So again, you can do whatever you want to with this. You can use whatever you want. You can be creative and come up with really the sky's the limit in terms of the number of choices. Once you've done this, you need to let it set for a while on your counter and then put it in the fridge to harden. So once it's hardened,
That would be good, I guess. What kind of chocolate would you use for that?
again, I'll take this.
Yeah, she knows that. She said
So I make this bark. And this is ginger and almonds instead of the pistachios, and this is what it comes out like. And you can just break off pieces, and you'll all get to taste this later. If you're, like I said, if you have the stamina for it. Have you all gone through the chocolates yet? I see a lot of chocolate on the tables. I don't know. Are you flagging? Are you finding any sort of interesting tastes or any wonderful differences between the chocolates? Can you taste the differences? Can you?
Taste what you like.
That's great. That's good. That's what I was hoping to hear.
I don't know. I better try.
That's why she only got, yes. That's a good question. So the question was, which chocolate do you cook with? And the answer is really whatever you like. You'll get the sheet at the end, and you'll be able to see what it is that you liked the best. And if what you like the best is one of the, say, bittersweet or semi-sweet chocolates, then that's the one you'll cook with. And if you can't get that one, then go with the one you like second best. It's really, you know, it's not magic. In terms of the chocolate chips, you might really decide that there's a big difference in the chocolate chips, and you might really care about the kind of chocolate chip that you use, and then you'll know what it is that you like. And you can do that. You can chop up the baking chocolate for chocolate chips.
I didn't like eggs.
Yep. You can do that, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Nestle's now makes a product that's called chocolate chunks, which is their regular chocolate chips that they put in chunk form, and that's to mimic the idea that you can do chocolate chunks. You can take a big bar of baking chocolate and you can chop it all up, and you can use that instead of chocolate chips. But again, remember, the baking chocolate is formulated differently than chocolate chips. So if you decide to cut up your chocolate and use it in, say, a chocolate chip cookie instead of a chocolate chip, it's going to melt differently. You might get sheets of chocolate in your chocolate chip cookies instead of chunks of chocolate, which might be delicious. There might be enough of a difference that makes your different chocolate chip cookie better. You would just do sort of a 1-to-1 ratio. You're doing 12 ounces of chocolate, you do 12 ounces of chocolate bar.
I noticed that the trend seems to be more chocolate chunk cookies. You know, I grew up with chocolate chip cookies. Do you have an opinion on that? We were just mentioning about some of the chunks.
Right, so
Melting.
if I were gonna do chocolate chunk cookies,
Yes.
I would just take a chocolate bar like this Lint bar, I'm just looking to see, that we used for the bark. I would just take one of these bars and I would just break it up or cut it up. If you were using a thick bar, like say, I have all this chocolate here, but a big Trader Joe's bar, they're very thick. You might have to take a knife or sometimes even like an ice pick kind of thing and really chunk up the chocolate. Do that on a cutting board that's very heavy. Don't do it on your counter that you can crack. So you can, really there's a lot of room to play in the world of chocolate. Not so much when you're melting it, but when you're adding it as chunks. Even when you're melting it, there's some room to play because you might want to think about what kinds of chocolate or what you want to do. I'm going to make some truffles for you. Let's see if I can do that in the time that we still have. So these truffles start with 12 ounces of chocolate. And I'm going to use my chocolate chips for this because it's easier. If I can see where they are. And again, 12 ounces of chocolate, when you're using something like this, it's very easy to just measure it on a scale. And these scales are great because, you know, they can tear the weight, T-A-R-E. So you can zero out the weight once I've added in my 12 ounces. If there's something else I need to add here, if I know the weight of it, I can just tear the weight down to 0 and just measure right into my bowl. That's another reason I love these bowls, or these scales. So I have 12 ounces of chocolate. These are going to melt a little bit faster. So I'll start it out for a minute again. We'll see how we go.
All I know about those is you.
And then I'm going to do
Cocoa afterwards.
the liquid that's going to be added to it. I'm going to heat that up as well. So it's half a cup of heavy cream, and again, I have to get down to measure the heavy cream. Half a cup of heavy cream, 2 tablespoons of light corn syrup. You don't want to use dark corn syrup because dark corn syrup will add a different flavor. All you have in the house is dark corn syrup. If you need to make this recipe right now, you don't feel like running to the store, that's okay. Just understand that the flavor might be a little bit different. It might have sort of a more caramelly flavor. So I need 2 tablespoons of this. A good way to measure corn syrup is by spraying your measuring spoon. So I have this cookie spray. It's like Pam, only I happen to prefer this brand. This is called Everbake. It's a canola oil food release. I get this, I mail order it from King Arthur, or if I'm up in Vermont at Norwich, which is just off of 91. I go and I stock up on this stuff. They won't mail this in the summer because they can't sell it, so you have to make sure you've got your stash in before the summer. But if you grease your measuring spoon, it'll come off the spoon much more easily. Right. And I need a little bit of vanilla. And again, I'm going to use the same vanilla. Now for this recipe, this is making chocolate truffles, remember. Chocolate truffles have all sorts of beautiful flavors when you go to the stores. Instead of adding vanilla, maybe you would add raspberry. You could add a little bit of chambord. You could add some orange liqueur. You could add some passion fruit. You can add whatever you want to. You just don't want to add too much because you'll throw off the balance. So you can add whatever flavorings you want. You can even add mint if you wanted to make mint truffles. You can almonds. The sky's the limit. And then when you've added your products to your cream, your flavoring to the cream, maybe you want to match the coating. Instead of using cocoa, maybe you want to roll in chopped nuts. So you have a lot of options here to be creative once the basic proportions are taken care of. That's probably good. Yeah, let's do it for a few more seconds. So our goal here is not to have it completely melted, but almost all the way melted, and then we're going to add warm cream, hot cream to it. I didn't add my salt yet. So it's a pinch of salt. For salt, I just use salt, regular table salt. But very often a recipe will call for kosher salt. They're not interchangeable in a recipe. A coarse salt and a table salt are not interchangeable. If you think about a coarse salt, it doesn't pack as tightly. And so if you were going to use, say, a quarter of a teaspoon of table salt, you would maybe use half a teaspoon of kosher salt. And then you get into the brands of kosher salt, Dunn Crystal versus Morton, because those have different size crystals. So it's best to, I'm sorry? Yeah. It's best to sort of keep the salt exactly the way the recipe wants it. Otherwise, you might end up with too much or too little. If you have too little salt, the flavor might be flat. In a recipe like this, the salt is there to boost the flavor. It doesn't have a sort of leavening action the way it might in bread. But it's just here to boost the flavor. So I just took a little thing of salt from home, and I'm just going to add a little pinch. You know, when you watch TV and you see these cooking shows and they add in salt and they're going like this, first of all, they're not eating it. Second of all, I think the camera really shows the salt very differently than you see it when you're sort of right up close and in your kitchen. So I'm not sure what they're doing with salt. It always looks like they're adding a ton of salt. Okay. So I'm going to let that heat up. And while I let that heat up, I am going to make a sling. The only reason I'm doing this in my 8-inch pan that I'm going to put the truffles in is so that I can get the truffles out of the pan later. So this is just the regular parchment paper that you can buy at Stop and Shop. I'm going to do it as a sling. Okay, so I've just crisscrossed the paper there. This is nice and hot, and I'll mix it together. And remember, this is cream and corn syrup and vanilla and salt, mixing in with the chocolate. The recipe wants you to let it sit for 3 minutes and then mix it together. And then the recipe wants you to pour it into the pan, the prepared pan, let it sit for 2 hours on your counter, then put it in the fridge for 2 hours or 2 days. Once that's done, let's see where it goes. I'm doing that in butter. The cream is heavy cream, and that's what the recipe wants. Again, in a recipe like this, they wouldn't be interchangeable because the recipe is calling for a specific percentage of fat. You know, in something like a soup or a stew, if it calls for cream, or I would probably always opt for milk, even skim milk. Just understanding that it's a different product that you end up with. This recipe wants butter to be added, which can, because we're running out of time. Just add it. And I'll show you what we end up with once it's been sitting in the fridge for a couple of hours.
Your method of madness.
And I did this in that Reynolds parchment on one side and foil on the other side paper. And you end up with something that looks like this, not very pretty, just a chunk of chocolate. And what we can do with that, sorry. You don't know about these? These are fantastic, really easy. Throw them in the dishwasher, they last forever. Wonderful cutting boards. So, like I said, nothing sticks to that paper.
No, but I have some. But it's not really this, it's plastic.
And more chocolate bar here too.
Yeah, so you could use it with me.
Yes, yeah. Have you gone through all the chocolates yet? And then you're almost ready to know what was in them. What you just ate. So I've already mixed the, whoops, it's very messy. This is cocoa powder mixed with confectioner's sugar. The recipe is there, the proportions are there. Now for the cocoa powder, we didn't talk about cocoa powder yet. Cocoa powder is just the chocolate solids that are smashed up. They might have something else added. It might have something else added to it. It might have sugar. It might have a little bit more cocoa butter added to it. It might have an alkalizing agent added to it. And if it does, then that's called Dutch processed cocoa powder. So cocoa by itself is very acidic. Cocoa that's been Dutched is a little bit more alkaline. Cocoa that's been Dutched will burn more easily, but it also has a much deeper chocolate flavor. So you might want to use Dutch cocoa, say, if you're not going to bake it, maybe in hot cocoa. Or for an application like this, where you're not going to be cooking with it afterwards, I'm just going to roll the truffles in this. And you might want to use natural cocoa with a product that's going to be baked. So, but you cannot interchange them in a recipe unless the recipe says, because the recipe will be written to accommodate the amount of acid or alkaline that's in your cocoa. So if a recipe says use Dutch processed cocoa, that is what you need to be using so that you can neutralize the acids in the cocoa properly in the recipe. So this is Dutch processed cocoa. Yeah, you can dump that right in. So Catherine's just pouring that right in that bowl, in that pan there, and it's going to sit. And people that come to my meeting tomorrow night are going to love those truffles. That's okay, you get your own here today. I made them for you. Okay, so all I'm doing
Use a kid's own knife.
is, it's a nice sharp knife. So I'm just cutting this into teeny little pieces, this size. And one of these 8-inch pans will make 64 of these little squares. And I have found, although the recipe doesn't say, but this is a secret that you know because you came here today, I have found that if the truffles are sort of room temperature, you can mush them in your hands and roll them rather than just rolling the squares, that doesn't work very well. You have to push it in your hands to a round shape first.
Chocolate meatballs.
Chocolate meatballs, exactly. And you know, these are supposed to look like the truffles, like the mushroom truffles that come out of the dirt. So they definitely will look like that. And I'm rolling them in the cocoa and confectioner sugar. It's nice if you have these gloves. You can get these gloves at CVS. They're really nice because otherwise this chocolate is going to melt in your hands. It's going to be a huge mess when you have to get to the phone or deal with a child. It's a pain in the neck. So anyway. You can roll all of these, all 64 of these little babies, and put them in the fridge, and you've got these gorgeous truffles for Valentine's Day. So you can make these, if you start them today is, let's see, Valentine's Day is next week, it's next Tuesday. You could buy your ingredients today, start them tomorrow, put them in the fridge, make them over the weekend, actually roll them over the weekend. It's a little tedious to roll all 64 of these. Person. And you would have these for Valentine's Day. And if you go to Michael's or maybe even Stop and Shop has them, little teeny candy cups. You can buy the little candy cups and put each truffle into a candy cup and into a box that you can certainly get at Michael's, a little candy box. And you can make a beautiful little display of Valentine's Day truffles if you want. So there you go. Now, I know we're out of time. So, are we going till noon or are we going till 11:30?
You can go till noon.
We'll go till noon, okay. Sure. All right, so Catherine is going to wash a bowl for me, and I'm going to make some whipped cream with the rest of the cream that I have here, and show you about the chocolate roll, which is the last recipe that you have. So this chocolate roll is, my mother's been making this for decades. It's the family dessert in our house. It's my son's favorite dessert. We've had it more times than I can count. My friends all like to make it now. It's very, very easy cake to make. It's a flourless chocolate cake that you make like a souffle cake. So you separate the eggs, the yolks get beaten with sugar, the whites get beaten by themselves until they're stiff. You fold it together, simple, done. 18 minutes in the oven.
What is the roll?
It's not a meringue because it's soft. It's soft. It comes out like this. And everybody always thinks that they've made a mistake because you take it out of the oven, and the recipe tells you this, no magic. You put a nice clean towel, wet, right on top of the cake. Right on top while the cake cools. And that keeps the cake from making a crust on the top. You don't want it to have a crust. So you let it sit. I made this last night. It sat with the damp towel on top. I covered it with some plastic wrap so that the water and the towel wouldn't evaporate and make a crust on top of the cake. When I saw that it was a little bit dry this morning, I got up and I sprinkled it with some more water. And I could make, like I said, I made this cake yesterday, but I could have made this cake 2 days ago. I could have made this cake a week ago and put it in the freezer, and that's fine. It'll work. It's a very versatile cake.
Fresh chocolate. It's simple.
No, she doesn't. She's just gluten-free. She just can't take this. She's allergic to it. But she doesn't necessarily have to. Me too. No,
So cream's obviously not being very carefully measured. Just using what we have. So the key to making whipped cream, Catherine's going to do this sort of behind. All right, you're going to watch how much sugar.
hope they're not hearing my conversation.
She can measure with her eyes with magic.
just that much, just that much, just a little bit. And just a little bit more. Where was I? The key to making good whipped cream is you need to have everything very, very, very cold. You want to have everything very cold. This is not necessarily very cold, but it'll be fine.
It's easier to make, actually.
On the other hand, the key to whipping egg whites is to have them room temperature. But the key to separating eggs is to have them cold. So if you have nice cold eggs, you separate them. You all know, I'm sure, because you've probably mostly all done this. When you separate egg whites, in order to be beaten, you need to make sure that your whites have not the tiniest little speck of grease in them from the egg yolk or from your bowl, what you might have cooked and used your bowl for before. Your beaters have to be completely clean. So you wouldn't use those beaters without cleaning them really, really, really well. And some people even say, once you're done cleaning them, then rinse them with vinegar to make sure that there's nothing on them. Anyway, the egg whites, once you've separated them when they're cold, want to be at room temperature. They'll get the most volume if you wait until they're room temperature. So you can go ahead and make all the rest of your ingredients and assemble everything that you need for your cake and preheat your oven while your whites get up to be room temperature. So once you've baked your cake, 18 minutes in the oven, it comes out kind of looking maybe a little bit better than this. Because this one has been sitting overnight and had the towel on top of it. When it first comes out of the oven, it's going to look like it has a little bit of a crust. Does somebody have a question? Okay. When you're ready to roll your cake, and this is the part that can be intimidating, and so this is what I want to show you. People say, oh, I could never do that. It's way too complicated, but it's not. It's really easy, and you can do it. I need the cocoa powder. Sprinkle the top of my cake with cocoa powder, and again, this is not getting cooked again, so I'm going to use my Dutch processed cocoa powder. And I'm going to get every corner of the cake, the whole thing. And then lay some wax paper on it. Now, you can use baking parchment for this, but I found that wax paper is just much more pliable, and for me, it's much easier to use wax paper. I always use wax paper. My grandmother used wax paper for this. It's just what I do. And I'm going to lay the wax paper over the cake, and then take a cutting board. And I like to do this over the sink because it's kind of messy, but I give it a flip. And then I can use the edge of the baking paper that I use. I also baked in wax paper. You can bake with the parchment, but I don't know, this is just a traditional recipe for me. I just bake in the wax paper. It's probably the only thing I bake in wax paper. Yep, this is a jelly roll. That's all it is. That's all it is a jelly roll. And there's a million recipes for this. I have no idea where this particular one came from, but it's just the one we use. And the recipe calls for chocolate chips, and I've always wondered about that. I think my mother always uses Nestle's chocolate chips when she makes it. I don't usually have those in the house. I almost always use those Haribo chips that I showed you from that big, huge bag, because that's what I have in the house. So it's a very forgiving recipe. And I'm just peeling the wax paper off. Now, a little corner of the cake cracked, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You have to, like Julia Child said, you have to have the courage of your kitchen. No one's in the kitchen besides you. Okay, and this beautiful whipped cream that Catherine made, dump it on and spread it. You're all oohing and eyeing. Something tells me that you've had enough chocolate if you're oohing and eyeing about the whipped cream. I do it this way. make a long thing long. And you could do it the other way. You could do it the other way, but in my house, it's long and thin. Yes. You can do it however you want. But the thing is, when you're spreading this cream, this person that gets this piece wants whipped cream. So you need to make sure that the whipped cream gets all the way to the edge.
Do you need to use heavy cream?
If you're going to whip it, you need heavy cream. Unless, you know, there are those whipped cream chargers that you can get with the canisters, the seal, yeah, exactly. And those, I think, will whip using lighter cream. I'm not sure. But what I always say about these, well, I hate to talk about Julia Childs here, but I was lucky enough to go to a class that she gave once, and she said, you know, you're allowed, you're allowed 2 tablespoons of fat a day. You might as well eat them and enjoy every one of them. And you're not going to eat this whole cake either. You're just going to eat a little piece, and you don't eat it every day, so you should enjoy it. If you can. I mean, obviously, there's reasons why you can't, but that's what I've learned.
What's the moderation? I'm not
All right, so I've spread the cream. And Catherine, oh, there it is. Because I make this all the time, I have to have a dedicated plate for it. So the plate is the right size. I was lucky enough to find this plated Crate and Barrel. And when it breaks, I'm going to be in trouble. Are you liking the truffles? Are they good? You guys can make these. All right. If you're interested in seeing and you can't see, please feel free to stand up, because this is the magic of this. So far, we haven't done anything hard or intimidating. This is the part that people always worry about. So I'm just using I'm not even holding the cake. I'm using the wax paper to roll, and I'm just going to let it fall on itself. It cracked. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. You don't have to panic. Okay, so now my last turn is going to go right onto my plate.
Sue, fine.
There you go. You can cover that with a chocolate ganache. Remember at the beginning of the class we talked about a chocolate ganache? You can do a drizzle of chocolate. You could, usually what I tend to do is I cover it with confectioner's sugar. The key to this, I think, once it's like this, is to put it in the fridge so everything can meld and get all soft and wonderful together. You can have some, but it won't taste as good as it will 2 hours from now. Like it still has some. I'm sorry, there's not going to be enough for everybody unless you all take just like a fork. But that's that. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about. I'm sorry, you had a question. You can put whipped cream on it. Absolutely. To me, that's just for me personally. That's just not what I do. But. You could turn this into a bouche de Noël. You could put the chocolate ganache on. You could make meringue mushrooms. You could cut off this an end and sort of arrange it on top and sort of glue it into the top so it looks kind of like a bump on a
How
log.
about fruit like raspberries?
Absolutely. I often serve it, Captain knows, I often serve it with raspberry sauce. Now, do you know how to make raspberry sauce? I didn't give you the recipe, but all you do is buy a bag of raspberries at Stop and Shop, and frozen raspberries, and let them defrost. Smash them up with a potato masher, and mix them with a little bit of sugar and maybe a squeeze of lemon juice, and that's it. If you want to, you can strain it, but again, it's kind of hard for me to take the time to strain it because I'm impatient. But you can strain it and get some of those seeds out. But that's a delicious raspberry sauce, and it's so easy. And you wouldn't do that with fresh raspberries. A fresh raspberry sauce is something completely different. But because frozen raspberries, when they're defrosted, are so juicy, it makes it delicious, really fresh tea tasting sauce. So, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about white chocolate, and then I think that that's all I've got for you, except to tell you about the chocolates you've tasted. Oh, and the cookies. Yes. I think there's enough there for you can come in now.
Oh, we did.
So white chocolate is a product that sometimes has nothing to do with chocolate at all. It's just a white plastic product, maybe with some wax. Sometimes white chocolate, high quality white chocolate, Ghirardelli, even some of the supermarket white chocolates that you buy in the baking aisle at Stop and Shop, they are good white chocolate. And the way you can tell is by looking at the ingredients label. So a white chocolate might have cocoa butter as its very first ingredient. Then you know it's chocolate, and it's made of cocoa butter. It's usually made of cocoa butter, sugar, vanilla, maybe some other sort of ingredients that might change the texture or make it an easier product to work with. You want it to be cocoa butter first, or at the very least second, but you want there to be cocoa butter in the white chocolate, otherwise it's just not worth it. And if I can just say one more thing about the white chocolate is that because it's primarily cocoa butter and sugar, both of which burn very easily, you have to melt it so carefully. It's a very finicky product. I'm sorry.
And you have to watch out too, sometimes the white chocolate has palm oil in it.
Exactly. They have palm
That's
oil,
not good.
Palm oil and coconut oil in some of these products, and those are not good. And those are texturizers, and they're just not great fats.
Palm oil's awful for you.
And they exactly. It's just.
That's
It's just
what's
not what
in
you want.
popcorn and
It's just not what you want to be eating. So let me tell you what it is that you've tasted. Catherine's cutting up all of the cookies for you, so you can taste the shortbread cookies. What did you like? What numbers did you like? 10. Okay, what else?
I like 5.
Well, that's an interesting
5. I like 7.
comparison. One is the
I like 7.
one is the strongest, and 10 is milk.
I felt pretty good.
So,
I felt a caramelly thing in it.
so I think you're going to need to share these sort of cheat sheets. When you tasted the chocolate chips, could you taste the differences in the chocolate chips? So the one was kind of flat. So which one was flat, did you think? The chips. That was the green and black 7%. So you don't want to buy that if you didn't like it.
Which one did you like this year?
Which chips? Did you know which chip? 12. So 12 is Ghirardelli. That's interesting. So 11 was Nestle's, the regular good old Nestle's Whole House chips. 13 was the Trader Joe's.
Oh,
And I do like to buy chocolate at Trader Joe's. They have a wonderful bar.
oh, that was 70%, the one I liked.
Trader Joe's is a great place to buy chocolate because they have these pound plus bars, which come in a package like this. And it's a big chocolate bar, good for baking, I think. So it's a very cost-effective way to buy chocolate. These Ghirardelli chips that some people didn't like are from the supermarket, $2.99 at Market Basket. A little bit more expensive than the Nestle's chips, but again, they mark the cocoa percentage on it. Nestle's chips does not mark the cocoa percentage. So that means that the Nestle's chip is probably, they're a little bit less concerned with the cocoa percentage and the quality of the chocolate that they're using. It's probably a blend. This is probably a blend. For the Nestle's, it's more likely to be maybe a sort of more workhorse that's used in their chocolate. It's very, very consistent from year to year.
Oh, I love to see that demonstration with the roller.
And so you can get, if you're using like a Caribbean chocolate, you can get it, and actually, have a
Oh, I made
vintage.
the other one a lot.
This year's chocolate has different
This one doesn't have flowers,
than
so that's
next
why I
year's
love
chocolate. And so some roasters will use chocolates just from a particular year to get a particular flavor profile.
it. Well, I don't do this a
Or a
lot.
particular region, or a particular country, or a particular everybody's real No,
I think we all should have a good hand for Barnes Please be careful driving home.